Hey everyone, Caleb with the Antique Book Collective, and today I'm getting to you guys with a quick crash course sort of thing on how to kill mold in your books. So guys, mold, as you guys probably know, is not something you want on your books. Mold, as you likely also know, is something that happens in the decomposition process. It helps decompose things. So if mold is helping decompose your books, we probably have an issue because we don't like our books turning into dirt. So obviously we want to kill the mold that's on our books. And guys, I have several ways that I have either tested or know do work on killing mold in your books. I have some tips, I have some tricks, but before we get into this, do not try this at home unless you're an expert. I'm what you call an expert or an idiot. I don't know, whatever you want to call me. But with that said though, guys, that's that little caveat. But more seriously, I have another caveat, guys. When you are doing this to clean up your books, you're doing this to a book probably that you care a whole lot about. Some people say if there's any mold on your book at all, you should just throw that baby away. And that is probably sound advice if it's not an important book to you, or not an expensive book, because books can be replaced. Of course, I don't like throwing away books, but sometimes a book is too far gone. Like, let's say your book is this big and it's this big now because of mold. Probably should throw that one away. But sometimes it's not a whole lot of mold. Sometimes a little bit here, a little bit there. Or maybe this is a book that your great-great-grandma bought and it got a little bit wet and now it has mold on it and you don't want to throw it away. So I do understand that there are times that you want to clean up these books. However, I do want to warn you guys, what you do can actually damage the book more. It might be damaging it because of the chemicals you use or because you didn't do something right. It happens to the best of us. We all make mistakes. So I do recommend that you guys do at least some practice, or honestly get a professional to do it. But if you are doing it yourself, practice up on some books that you do not care about. Maybe buy some dirt cheap books that you can just run these things, different tests on to see what works best. But test these things out, practice a little bit, because you do not want to have your very first time doing this be on this very important book for you, because let's face it, you might spill some water on it and make the damage even worse. So with that said though, guys, I am going to dive right on into this. I hope these warnings were enough to at least get you guys to think, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this on this one book. But at the end of the day, it's your choice to do whatever you want to do. So with that said though, guys, first things first, something that I hear a lot of people recommend, a lot of people do, something I have not done myself in this particular way, but something that I do know can work and does work for people, is actually taking your book, putting it in a plastic bag, throwing some baking soda in there. Make sure your book's closed when you throw the baking soda in, otherwise you're going to have a mess. But throw some baking soda in there. Baking soda helps to kill mold because it draws out moisture and does a whole lot of other fancy things. But with your book in the plastic bag with the baking soda, put that thing in the freezer and leave it there for overnight, for a day, for 2 days, something like that. Don't leave it in there forever, because books are supposed to be stored at room temperature. If you do not have them at room temperature, there can be actually issues. But just sticking it in the freezer, it can actually help to either kill the mold or put the mold into hibernation. And then once you've done that, you can actually sometimes brush the mold off, believe it or not. Or you can go on to do the fancy chemicals and other things that I'm going to do that will help kill the mold and remove the mold. I personally would recommend doing things in addition to just freezing it, because if you just freeze it, there's no guarantee that that will work. It can work, but no guarantee whatsoever, so do not bank on that. That's my recommendation there. So next things next, this is another one that you can do. Personally, I think the freezer trick is a lot better than this next trick, but this next trick is a very, very important one. With that said, though, excuse me for a second. Sorry for the interruption. Computer's still being funky, so get what you paid for, I guess. I don't know. Thought I paid good money, guess not. But with that said though, guys, the next thing is UVC lights. So UVC lights, that is a special kind of light that is used to kill germs, viruses, and mold. Mold, guys, it is killed in the same sort of way that UVC lights kill bacteria and viruses. And that is, the UV lights get in and they actually basically denature the DNA of these actual things. And because they no longer have DNA, because it's been denatured, those things actually die off and they cannot spread and all that sort of stuff. So that's a really, really good thing that you can do. Not necessarily the only thing you should do. Not necessarily the thing that you should do if this is the only time you're ever going to do it and you're never going to do it again. But I do recommend it if you guys are booksellers like me. I do recommend buying at least one UVC light, because it does definitely help in this process. But guys, the UVC light, if you guys want to buy one, you can go down in the description. I think I might have one listed in my little list on Facebook, which you guys can click again down in the description. Or if you guys don't want to spend any money on it, and if you live in somewhere that's not Oregon, you can actually put your books outside for a few hours to make sure you're watching them, but put them outside, flip through all the different pages, and the UV light from the sun can actually kill the mold as well. For me, since I do this as my business, I did end up buying the UVC lights because I cannot always put the books outside, I cannot always watch them, but I can always have my UVC lights going. It's very nice. It can help kill the mold on the books. Of course, there are dangers to that. You have to wear sunglasses and all these other things, because UV light is dangerous to humans too. It's not too terrible, but there are risks, so keep that in mind. But with that said, I actually have mine. I don't have them going all the time, but when I do need to treat a book with UVC light, or even when I'm taking photos of books, I will actually have them getting hit with UV light. That way I can kill whatever germs are on them. And I don't recommend that you leave them outside in the sun, your books forever out in the sun. I don't recommend you leaving them under the UVC light forever, because it's like, oh, I'll kill all the germs forever, because the sun does damage. The UVC light potentially could damage, but the sun definitely does. Your books, I don't know if UV light can sun bleach your things. I have not actually looked that one up, but the sun does sun bleach books. So that is an issue that you should look out for. A little bit of time in the sun is not going to ruin things, but extended periods of time in the sun will. So with that said though, when you are doing these things, make sure that you are flipping through the pages of these books, and the flipping through the pages under the sunlight or under the UV light, I recommend taking a couple seconds on each page as you're doing it. That way it can get full exposure to the UV light, and that will ensure that all the mold that is inside of your book gets exposed and gets killed. Of course, there's no guarantee that this will work 100%. Maybe there's a little shadow here or there that the mold might end up still surviving, but it will do a very good job at killing things. But it won't get rid of all the colors from the mold. It won't get rid of the fuzziness of the mold itself. It just should kill the mold itself. But with that said, these are the ones that I would strongly recommend you guys do. And that is rub down your book with a diluted or a pure mixture of rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide or bleach. I have not done hydrogen peroxide just yet, but I have done bleach and I have done rubbing alcohol. Rubbing alcohol, guys, it's a lot. I know it sounds stupid, but I find the rubbing alcohol is a lot wetter than the bleach. I know that sounds dumb. I know it's like they're both liquid, you moron. But from what I did on my tests that I did for these things, when I did rubbing alcohol on the pages of the book, on the edges of the book to try to clean off the mold, I actually had a lot more of the waviness affect that book as soon as the rubbing alcohol went in. It like got absorbed super quick and just immediately started causing waviness, and it was like, oh, that's not good. And then I did the bleach, and for some reason that did not do quite the same thing. It was like every drop of rubbing alcohol was like 5 drops of water somehow. I don't get how that works. So that is something that I do want to caveat and warn you guys for, is rubbing alcohol is a little funkadoodle on that, especially when you dilute it with water. It's going to do that a little bit more. The bleach, again, guys, I found that it was a little bit superior, and I personally prefer bleach at this point for doing the text block of books. I do have a lot of other things that I want to share on this though, so bear with me. But onto the hydrogen peroxide thing, that is, from what I've gathered, again, I haven't done it, but from what I've gathered, it is a lot like bleach on the entire cleaning process for the books. Straight hydrogen peroxide is a little bit dangerous, so keep an eye out for that and be a little careful with that. But if you buy the hydrogen peroxide that you will use for just usual house uses, the ones that you'll buy at like Walgreens or whatever, that one probably is going to be diluted already, so potentially that won't be necessarily the worst thing. But with that said, people recommend that you dilute all these different things, 10 parts water, 1 part whatever you're using. I find that sometimes I want to use straight alcohol, sometimes I want to use straight bleach. I found straight bleach worked a whole lot better at killing the mold and getting rid of the mold color. And again, I have not done hydrogen peroxide, so I don't have a recommendation for that, but some people do use it. With that said though, guys, if you guys are doing this, make sure that while you're treating the book that you're squeezing that baby really hard if you're doing the text block, to make sure that moisture does not get in between the pages and all the way in, because that can just make the mold junk get inside of the book further. And in addition to that, it can make the pages get wavier a whole lot easier. If you keep it tight, if you keep it pressed, it is a lot less likely to have all those same issues. So that is something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is if you guys are opening your book up and you're treating like the page itself, put something underneath it to make sure that the rest of your book does not get wet. Let's say you spill, let's say you do too much water on it, let's just say you do it perfectly right. There is a chance that moisture will go from this page onto the next page, onto the next, onto the next, onto the next, and ruin your entire book and make you want to cry. So you should put something underneath it. However, what should you put it under? Like, can I put a cloth? Can I do this or this or this? Yeah, you can put whatever you want under it, but what I strongly recommend you do is cling wrap. You know, the thing from your kitchen, cling wrap, plastic. Like, just a nice little layer of plastic will prevent any moisture from leaching from this page onto the next page. And just put that cling wrap down right underneath it. It's really easy to just wrap your book with it. Totally easy to do, so I do recommend that. Personally, I have like these 8.5 by 11 pieces of like hard plastic that I personally use. I don't know exactly where that stuff came from, but it's what I use, and I do prefer that greatly. If you guys are going to do this for a long time, I would recommend buying something like that because it does work a lot better. But cling wrap definitely does work, and if you guys are doing this just once in your entire life, cling wrap will be definitely the way to go if you're doing it like that. And once you have treated your book, make sure that it stays open and the page dries completely before you close it and try to go on to the next page. Otherwise, your moisture is going to spread. We don't want that. We want your pages to be absolutely clean if you have mold on the faces of your pages. And with that said, guys, if you have mold on the edges of your book, odds are mold is also inside of the book. But I know it sounds bad. I know it makes you want to clean the entire book. You don't have to do that. There is mold in every single book. There is mold in the air I'm breathing right now, just as it is. There's mildew, mold, fungus, dust, all that sort of stuff. The world is not a sterile place, so it's not the end of the world if there's still a little bit. Yes, if you can visibly see that's an issue, yeah, you should probably clean that. But if you don't see it, then it can be an issue still. I'm not guaranteeing that it won't be, but it might not be worth doing the damage that you could potentially do in order to clean it. So that's just something that I would say to a friend or anything like that. So it's not an official recommendation, but it is something to keep in mind. With that said, though, guys, those 3 chemicals that you guys probably have right now that you can use. However, there are also fancy chemicals that you can buy online that are made to kill mold on leather, on paper, on walls, like whatever you want. Basically, they do have a lot of fancy chemicals that can do all these things, and they'll probably do a better job, and they probably are a little bit better than what I already listed off. However, I have not used them. They oftentimes cost too much anyway, so it's like, maybe not. So honestly, you could check those out if you want. I saw good reviews on a lot of these things. I've heard some people mention using them, but for me, most of the people I've talked to, most of the people that I've learned from, most of my own experience is with alcohol, not drinking alcohol, rubbing alcohol, and bleach. Those are what I've had the most success with. I do still, once I treat my books with the rubbing alcohol, with the bleach, and if you guys do hydrogen peroxide, I would still recommend hitting your book with some UVC light or putting it outside in the sun just one more time to make sure that the mold is dead. That is something that I would personally recommend, just because, again, that is a nice sort of stopgap measure to sort of improve your odds of your cleaning staying positive. And with that said, I do have a couple caveats that I'd like to add. So first things first, with old books, particularly just old books, guys, new books, the gilding on new books is oftentimes not actual gold, but on old books it's real gold. And real gold, guys, here's a little close-up of it, and here's the gold on the cover. Real gold, guys, it's antifungal, antibacterial, and antivirus, and not computer antivirus. We're talking like actual viruses, so like coronavirus and Zika virus, all those sorts of viruses, like actual germ viruses. And gold, guys, it can actually kill those things, and because it can kill those things, every single book that I've ever found that has gilding on it, on the edges, there is no mold on those edges. There might be mold on the page itself, so that does happen. However, from my experience, you only have the mold on the page itself if the book was open at some point, got wet, and then mold spores got onto it while it was wet, and then the book was closed, and then that can allow the mold to spread. However, if the book was closed and has been closed like almost forever, there's not going to be mold inside of the book itself. There might be a little bit because, again, the world is not a sterile environment, but if the book is closed and stays closed and doesn't have too much moisture on it, mold will not develop into a large colony that will be dangerous to your health. It's just going to be the same amount of mold as what you normally see. So that is something to keep in mind. If you guys can, I recommend buying books that are only gilded for the rest of your life. That way you don't have to worry about it at all. Oh wait, that'd be a lot of money. So obviously that's why people don't still do that. Real gold is expensive. It's got a whole lot of cool benefits. It's beautiful as well, but it's not necessarily practical for everyone to do. And in fact, that's why a lot of antique books are not gilded. Those that are oftentimes more expensive books anywho. So that's something to keep in mind. But with that said, on to my next caveat really quick. So guys, the next thing, back onto cleaning mold, all that sort of stuff. So let's say you hit your book with the UV light once you're all done. You think your book's clean now. It's dry. It's no more mold. I don't see mold. I'm happy. My book's saved. Oh, I'm just the happiest person alive. Well, I have bad news for you guys. Even though you can't see the mold, it does not mean the mold is not there still. It does not mean that the mold can't come back. It can come back. So I recommend, if you do clean your book, if you do put in all the time to do that, quarantine that baby. So take your book. Do not put it with the rest of your books. Take your book, guys, and set it aside for at least a month. I recommend at least 6 months to ensure that there is not a mold issue still. Watch that thing and be like, okay, honestly, guys, take a photo as soon as you're done. Put it there, and then come back after the month, after the 6 months, however long you want to have it sit, and ensure that nothing has changed. If it is getting mold coming back onto it by that point, then you know that that mold could have actually spread to your other books. Because guys, mold spreads like the plague. And in fact, it puts out little spores into the air, and that can affect all of your books. So that's why you want to quarantine the books after you clean the mold off them. In fact, if you see a mold on any of your books, quarantine that thing. Even if you haven't cleaned it yet, quarantine it, or else all your other books could get mold on them. In fact, if I personally had a library of books and one of them started getting mold on them, I would take the entire library out, and I would either put it outside for a day, or I'd hit it with the UV light for a whole day, just to ensure that the mold was not going to hit the other books. And this is the books, like, if I did not see mold on them, I would just do that and it'd be fine. And then of course I would clean the moldy book. So that is what I would personally do if I was in that situation. End of the day though, guys, something that you really want to do if you don't want mold on your books is, let's say you don't have mold already. If you do have mold already, you do have to clean that or throw away the book or whatever you want to do. But if you guys do want to prevent mold from happening, growing on your books, you need to keep your books kept at a good humidity. What the EPA recommends for your home's humidity is between like 35% and 55%, or 30 and 50, somewhere in there, that sort of range. Depending on what source you see, it actually does vary a little bit. But end of the day, you want to keep your home's humidity on the lower end of things. For me, where I live, I'm in the Pacific Northwest Willamette Valley, so I live in a town called Gresham. So on the Willamette Valley, oftentimes our homes are like naturally going to stay within that safe zone, unless, of course, if you have like a moisture-related problem, like a leaky roof or a burst pipe or something like that. Oftentimes our places are just naturally going to stay that sort of humidity that is in the good zone. However, of course, there are other places, like if you lived in the bayou, if you lived in Hawaii, humidity is a whole lot higher. In fact, fun fact, guys, so when you guys build a house, if you guys have ever built a house or if you're repairing a wall, there are two different kinds of sheetrock. I know there's actually a whole lot of different kinds, but one of them is the normal kind that is like the brown paper and the white paper. And then the other kind, it's the brown paper on one side and then green paper on the other. And the green actually shows that the thing is like moisture proof, that sort of thing. It's what you use in your bathrooms. Some people use them in their kitchens as well if you're building in a normal temperate environment. However, in Hawaii, they build their entire houses. I lived in Hawaii for a little bit, but they built their entire houses out of just the green stuff, which I thought was pretty interesting. And that's just because there's so much humidity in the air in Hawaii. So if I lived in Hawaii, I would buy dehumidifiers in order to prevent all the moisture from getting on my books and rotting my books away, causing mold on my books, that sort of stuff. However, if you guys live in, let's say, Death Valley, California, it's really, really dry air. It's an arid environment. Therefore, the humidity is actually going to be really low, and potentially you will want to get a humidifier in order to prevent your books from being damaged, because actually too low of humidity can hurt your books. Really, really low humidity, guys, it can actually cause like leather to start cracking, just like it makes your skin crack, you know? So if your skin's cracking, if your lips are chapped, the leather on your book might be getting damaged. So that is something to keep in mind. I have an entire video, guys, which talks about how to store books properly, which I will link to at the end of the video up there. So that is something to keep in mind. With all that said and done, though, guys, I hope this was helpful. Again, be really careful when you're doing this. I recommend practicing first, and once you've finished cleaning your book, quarantine it. Do not put it with the rest of the books, or else it could potentially spread. With that said, though, guys, thank you for watching. I actually have a video right here, which is about how to clean foxing on books. And then right beneath it is, of course, the video I promised you guys about how to store your books properly. There are a lot of ways on how to store your antique books, which you should do, and honestly, it's good for non-antique books as well. So with that said and done, though, guys, be sure to check out one of those videos, and be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.